know where I want to hear this, but
Absolutely.
I want to hear how we get from you reading a book that turned your world upside down to what happened. So please.
So I started, after this mind-blowing revelation, I started to take the steps necessary to respectfully and accurately portray a Romani persona. Which, of course, if the information isn't already available, isn't already in the SCA libraries, there is no one, I want to play a 14th century French persona. There is plenty of material available. There are plenty of people who are familiar with that period that can help you build this persona. There was no rubric for a Romani persona. I was building a persona from the ground up, which was both stressful and rewarding. There was a certain level of pride in each step.
Just finding the right books was probably a challenge.
Yes, predominantly because the Romani culture did not have a written language until the 70s. I'm talking 1970.
That late?
There was no written language. All the information about the Romani in period was written by non-Romani.
Which has its own problems associated with it.
Tons, because you are going, especially since the Romani were migratory. They were often considered the bane of a town when they came to town. They were outsiders. So the majority of information written about them was written in a very derogatory, in a very shedding them in a bad light. So it took collecting a lot of these stories to try to piece together who these people were. Luckily, there are academics who did part of my work for me, who had established a chronology from their diaspora in northwestern India, moving across the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So I had a timeline, I had a chronology. The next part was finding accurate descriptions of how they looked, the clothing they wore, which mostly is in paintings. Luckily, there is a large collection of artwork in period that depicts the Romani. Whether or not the painters are depicting them accurately, we will never know. We can't go back and ask them.
But to be fair, that is a problem that is fairly universal in medieval paints. Almost any culture, whether it's an English painter painting English culture or an Italian painter painting a Romani, that is a lens that the whole of the SCA is familiar with. So
deciphering what in a painting is
artistic license.
Yeah, artistic license. But it came down to not having any other source. There are a few extant writings that describe Romani garb. The three things that are mentioned, I think I have three different period writings that describe the Romani. And there are three major things that are in each of them, and that is the head covering. The women had their head covered. It was this drape, which is described in all three, and it was hooped earrings and often a ring through the nose. But as far as the hip scarves, the coin necklaces, the rings on every finger.
We're back to 80s fantasy writing.
Exactly.
At that point. So I got to admit, I'm a little amused that the pierced nose and the hoop rings are probably the least unusual things in the modern eye. Says something.
But they were written.
Yeah.
And they were probably written about because they were in stark contrast to
the native traditions
yeah,
of wherever its writing is from.
to what women would wear in whatever place and time we're looking at. Because you wouldn't have seen large hooped earrings or nose rings.
And now this research, I remember talking with you while you were doing it. This was not a 1 or 2 week project. This was a year.
I'm still doing it.
Oh, you're still doing
yes.
it, but a majority of your foundational stuff, you weren't pulling out what you considered to be historical Romani garb. Probably a year or more after you started this. So this was a many fold process.
Which goes back to, you called it trailblazing. That sounds a little self-aggrandizing to me, but I was...
If they say it, it's self-aggrandizing. When I say it, it's me sitting back going, damn, that's a lot of work.
There were no giants on whose shoulders I could stand.
Yeah.
I was doing this from the ground up, which is why it took so long. And it is still a process. I come across new resources all the time that cause me to
Adjust.
Adjust. Whether it be the classes I teach, information in the classes I teach, whether it be, the garb I wear, be it how I present myself. But yeah, it was a long process. And it was a process that I will have to admit, I would get to a point and I would have to have a sit-down conversation with myself. Is this something I want to keep doing?
And the person at the other side of that mirror would go, yes. Keep doing it.
And they did. But I was approached by numerous people that cautioned me against picking this persona, against going down this road. And it came to my attention that the prejudices against the Romani people that exist to this day in the mundane world carried over into the SCA, and there was this pervasive attitude that Romani personas were not valid. Romani personas had no place.
And I can attest to that without any hesitation. There were actually several peerage players who they had this little script ready. Like they could rattle off all of the Romani players who they knew, and they used the pejorative word for it, and they were very quick to point out the highest award each of them had, and all of them were AOA or non-armigerous. And one of them, I remember one of them bragged to me that none of them would ever make it to their circle, and they would make sure of it. So, I'm not trying to vilify anyone, because it's the world we live in, and I'm certainly not trying to build up any sort of organized effort. These are all individual people with their own biases. I have my own. I think you've identified plenty of your own.
We all
biases.
have biases,
but
we all have them.
The opposition that Castellana faced was codified, tangible, and very, very real. So I don't want to sound like we're artistically codifying things for the sake of a story. No, this was
a real barrier.
God, this was a very real barrier.
And that is exactly what I heard. The listing of people who played Romani personas that did not have awards higher than an AOA. And that was part of the script that I heard. It was if you choose to play a Romani persona, you will, quote unquote, not make any friends, and you will never rise in rank.
It was kind of disturbing how many of those players they were citing are good friends of mine.
They were doing it. No one that approached me in a condescending or negative way. I was being approached by friends, and I'm telling you this as a friend. I am warning you.
You got the nicer end of those equations.
I did. No one came to me and chastised me and said, don't do this. It was all a very pull me to a side, fair warning.
Yeah. My friendship with Castellana has never been a secret. We've known each other, and we've been seen together, sometimes fleeing the scene of the crime. I did have one or two people who pulled me aside, and you do need to make sure you're not caught associating with. I remember one of them said that, and that was the time I walked up to you going, "Is anyone sitting next to you at Feast?" I need to sit next to you at Feast, and watch this
There's a
person
great
have
quote of,
coronary.
"Don't tell me what to do because I will do it twice and film it." That's what that reminds me of. Someone saying, you don't want to be associated with that person, and you walked up and sat down next to me and went, "Watch me."
Yeah, yeah. So year and a half, 2 years of hard research. Just this coming from the person who, when asked, who are you? You described yourself as you're in your element, up to your elbows in books, with your nose in a book and a cup of lukewarm tea next to you.
At the time it was coffee. The joke was 2 o'clock in the morning, book in front of me, highlighter in my mouth, notes beside me, coffee.
Yes,
This
you're right. That is
this was my element. Yep.
So now you have friends of yours that dress in Romani as well.
Not exclusively.
Not exclusively,
Yeah.
but how did
secondary personas
you? Yeah.
and things like that.
How
yeah.
did you rope others in? What was the evolution out?
This points us right back at the coronation you want to talk about.
Okay. There's a method to my madness.
Yes, I knew where you were going. So I had been blazing this trail, doing this research, creating this persona, with the knowledge, or with the, at the time, understanding that this was going to be my life's work. I fully believed that I would shake free of my mortal coil before the Romani became a respected persona.
Which is not an unreasonable prediction under the
I
circumstances.
thought I was going to be doing this in the SCA for as long as I played in the SCA. Up until Vlad won Crown Tournament. I hope I am getting my information right, but I believe, based on the stories I've been told, that Vlad himself started as playing a Romani persona.
Yes.
And
yes.
he was approached in the same manner that I was.
He did further some of the uglier, what today we would consider to be uglier stereotypes, in jest, and he was, I will give credit where credit's due. It was among friends, it was meant as a joke between friends. He never tried to claim it as a persona, and he was trying for persona early on.
Important note, Vlad is mundanely Romani.
Yes.
This is important.
Yes.
Outside of the SCA, outside of personas, Vlad is Romani.
He has the heritage to speak from. And yes, he did have that as part of his persona. I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that bit of history. Yes, he did lean into some of the uglier stereotypes.
As did I.
As did you. And these weren't particularly the more egregious examples. It was, if it's shiny, I'll steal it, which among the fighter crowd, the fighters at the time, the joke was they'll steal anything that's not nailed down, so Vlad was just more selective about it.
Yep.
So.
And it wasn't done maliciously.
It wasn't done
either,
maliciously.
Me or him.
Yeah,
And
it was not, to be absolutely clear, you never heard him crack those jokes in a public setting. This was all 5 or 6 people to practice, or at the after chatter of a conversation. But yes, his persona early on, he did claim Romani persona, and he worked with what he had.
And again, to my knowledge, I'm a little bit more steady in saying this. He never really changed personas. He just built up a Turkish, I believe he is Turkish persona.
Turkmen.
Persona around the Romani persona he already had, which is perfectly,
the
period.
historical. I think for me at least, from what I understand, a more accurate statement is, what is your persona? Answer, I'm the guy that just beat you on the field. He let his skills speak for him.
Yep.
And that's probably, I've watched him say that once, to be fair. But it's like, to borrow from the John Wick poster, work until you no longer have to be introduced. That's Vlad, in and out of armor, to be fair. But he never had a highly codified persona. Like, he didn't really lean into particular costume or accent or anything. So it wasn't that he was trying to pull away from anything. But when it came time to codify who am I and what's my persona, I think he put on the Turkish vestments on a Romani skin, and when people asked for details, he would pretty much say, all you have to worry about is I'm about to face you on the field.
Which brings us to the Crown tournament in which Vlad won. And